Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture where we introduce the topic of philosophy of mind. So, last week we started to discuss the nature of reality, what's real. And for a lot of people, common sense understanding and perception of the world is that it's primarily material. It's physical in nature. It's something you can touch. I mean, you're sitting behind a computer right now, or your iPhone maybe, and you're holding a physical thing, and you're probably sitting in a physical chair, and this is the common way we think and perceive about our reality. It's physical in nature. Yet we looked at arguments last week that said, hey, maybe the reality that we're perceiving as physical, that's maybe some sort of illusion, and there's something more real than that, right? We looked at Plato's theory of forms, his form of idealism, and we also looked at Berkeley's idealism, both of which point to the possibility that reality is primarily not physical. And there's also just the subjective experiences that you have, right? There's this felt sense that you have a consciousness, that you have an awareness, and that doesn't seem to be material. And this has led some people to then believe in a form of dualism, that there's both material and physical substance in the world. The most famous philosopher to have this belief is Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. His I is an immaterial I, some sort of soul, some sort of consciousness. So his form of dualism that believes there's an I that's immaterial and a body that's physical is often referred to as Cartesian dualism or substance dualism or mind-body dualism. And for a lot of us, that's kind of intuitive that we feel that we have a mind that's immaterial because we feel like there's a mind that's controlling our body or communicating with our body. So a lot of us have that intuition that we are more than just this physical self, that me, when I'm thinking and feeling, that's something separate. So hence this dualistic view of reality. Well, I mean, if you have that view, then there's an obvious issue with that, right? That's referred to as the mind body problem that we'll talk about in a second. So, why even believe in this? Why even believe that there is a mind and a body? Well, as we mentioned, it's intuitive, but for a lot of us who have a certain background or come from a certain culture or certain belief system, it fits with that belief system. If you believe in a soul, if you believe in an afterlife, that sort of dualistic perspective is part of that background framework, of your culture. So here is a argument you'll often hear that supports dualism. First premise, if substance dualism is false, then minds cannot exist independently from bodies. Premise two, but minds can exist independently from bodies. Therefore, substance dualism is true. So as you hear or read this argument, I mean, what strikes you as possibly a premise that you might want to question? If you're like most of us, you'd be asking questions about that second premise. Minds can exist independently from bodies. How do we know that? Well, I mean, you can refer to something like what Plato gave us in arguing for the soul and say things like the body has desires, right? It gets hungry, it gets thirsty, the body craves certain things, yet you can exert your free will to tell your body not to do it. It's as if there is a mind independent of the body that can influence the body, if not, dictate what it does. So you can be hungry or thirsty and not drink and not eat, right? Because you're busy doing something or because you're choosing to, be more productive with your time or so it feels as if there's a mind there that's influencing the body. You're not slave to it, right? What would be an objection to that? How might you go, that doesn't necessarily prove there's a mind? Well, if you're a physicalist, if you're a materialist, you can say, well, when you say you are telling your body not to do something, well, that's something physical that's telling your body not to do something. I mean, your body is telling your body not to do something. It doesn't have to be an invisible, separate mind, right? The body can have multiple sorts of desires, multiple sorts of wants. And it could just be physically one want will overpower the other. possibly. I mean, another way to look at this second premise and to try to defend it is to think about any sort of experience where somebody says they felt as if they were out of their body. You probably know of stories where people have reported, being in a hospital room, maybe undergoing a procedure, a surgery where they're unconscious, and they report having an experience of being outside of their body, witnessing their own operations, right? You can refer to near death experiences where people claim to have an experience of an immaterial self leaving the body to go to a different realm of existence. Or maybe other sorts of stories where people go, yeah, I felt as if I was detached from the body. Well, if that's true, well, then it feels as if there must be some other, you know, realm, some spiritual realm. There must be some other way of existing than just within the body. Of course, you can then ask yourself, is that the best explanation for those experiences? Does a immaterial mind, does that have to exist for those experiences to be explained? Well, if you're a materialist, you might say things like, well, the brain made you experience that all of those experiences of going towards a different realm, of leaving your body, of observing your body, and those are just what your brain is making you feel. It's an illusion or delusion of your body, right? Possibly when you're unconscious, going on the operation, some sensations were coming into your brain, and even though you were technically unconscious, your brain was able to imagine what that must be like, to be under the operation. So it gave you images of being above your body, even though you were really simply unconscious. Well, there are lots of arguments we could pose against these arguments in favor of substance dualism and the existence of a separate non-physical mind. But really, the biggest problem for the dualist isn't that their arguments are necessarily bad, but that they can't or will have trouble explaining how the mind and the body interact at all. If you're going to be a dualist and say you believe your mind can influence your body to do certain things, if you're going to be a dualist and believe that what your body physically experiences can be communicated to your mind so that you have feelings and thoughts about the physical experience, well, you have quite a metaphysical dilemma on your hands. Because how does something immaterial that has no form, has no physicality to it, how does that influence, communicate, interact with something physical? Here's a remote control, and I can use it to control my slides that I'm presenting to you right now. And it feels or it seems as if that when I press the button, it's communicating to the computer non-physically, but that's not true, right? Because when I press my button, it's sending some sort of electromagnetic wave to my computer, and that computer receives that electromagnetic wave, and then it then processes that information and changes the slide. But that's all a physical process that can all be explained with physics by referring to the material world. But if you're talking about a mind that has no form, has no tangible substance to it, how does nothing communicate with a physical thing like the body? How does a non-material entity like a mind tell the body anything? And vice versa. How does the body communicate with something that has no physicality to it? This is the mind body problem, probably the most famous or one of the most famous dilemmas in metaphysics. Okay. So when we talk about the philosophy of mind, a lot of that is based upon this fundamental question. And by addressing this fundamental question, you get into discussions about, well, what exactly is the mind? So here are various solutions to the mind body problem. Obviously, if you're an immaterialist, you're going to say, well, there's no physical body, so you don't have to worry about the mind-body problem. Just minds exist or ideas exist. So there is no question of how does a body communicate with the mind and vice versa. The biggest problem is going to be for the dualists. So next lecture we'll talk about, well, how do the dualists address this problem? And then lastly, we'll take a look at the materialist or physicalist responses to this problem. Because it seems as if, we have minds, we have an experience of having a mind. So if you're a physicalist and you only believe that what exists is physical, well, then you might have to redefine what the mind even is, because you primarily think the world is physical in nature. So what exactly is the mind, right? And as part of the physicalist response, we'll review logical behaviorism, we'll review identity theory, and at the end of this week, we'll review functionalism. The following week, we'll take a look at eliminative materialism too.